Good morning, YouTube. Warbles on a lot here with the very dag end of the Outsiders, followed by First Dog on the Moon. Sadly, I think they're going to talk to us about croquet.
It's Amanda Smith with you, along with Outsiders Sinclair Davidson, Van Badham and Miriam Cosick. Well, let's move on to reform of another kind, and this time workplace reform. The Productivity Commission has recommended
Yay team, we missed the cricket.
back Sunday penalty rates in the hospitality and retail sectors, but unions, they're not happy.
The union movement's not about to compromise and stand by and see the pay packets of low-paid workers being cut.
Miriam, I put myself through university working a lot of hours over the weekend as a waitress because of the higher penalty rates. What impact do you think reducing Sunday penalties would have?
I did similar. I put myself through university working Saturdays and Sundays on the front desk of a radio station. I think the impact would be appalling. What we're talking about here, it's ironic that we're talking about this at exactly the same time that we're talking about politicians' sense of entitlement. But these people who earn penalty rates are in the kind of jobs that are the poorest paid, the least secure, often with 0 hours, part-time, and these are the people whose penalties we want to take away from them. The other thing is that there's been a lot bandied about this week about Sunday no longer being the day of rest. Well, I've just battled across town, very intrepid adventure this morning, trying to cross the city to surf.
This
route.
is in Sydney, the big
in
race.
Sydney, that's right. And why do they hold the city to surf and other marathons on Sunday? Why don't they hold it on Tuesday? It's because most people work weekdays. Most people spend the weekends going to the footy, Sunday lunches, and all that kind of stuff. So this idea that Sunday is no longer a day of rest, all days are becoming equal, is kind of part of the neoliberal project as far as I'm concerned. And it's a way of reducing wages in the broader attempt to increase profits. And I don't think we should disadvantage the poorest.
Sinclair, there is that famous line that Maggie Smith delivers in Downton Abbey. Do you remember in the first series she said, "What's a weekend?" And counter to what Miriam's saying, the reason for having higher rates on Sunday, for many argue, has long gone. What would be the economic impact of reducing Sunday penalty rates for hospitality and not hospital, because they're not being affected, hospitality and retail workers? Would it revitalise the economy?
The Productivity Commission are making a utilitarian argument here where they're comparing the wage rate which a person might get per hour and saying, well, if we paid less, we'd get more people working. Now, that may or may not be true. But what is going to happen is the people who are already working are going to be earning less. So there's actually a bit of a transfer going on here as opposed to bringing new economic resources into play. So I haven't quite seen that unraveled just yet. I mean, a lot of people, I did it myself. I used to work on Christmas Day because it was 4 times in the bad old days. And so the people who are already working might work less, other people might work more. There's actually a big distributional element that's going on here that I don't think has been fully teased out. At the same, I don't think it's unreasonable to pay people more to work on the weekend. Maybe double time is too much. That is a separate argument to have. But I think paying people for doing a job of work when other people don't want to do it is how our society works, and this is how our society should work. So let's see the distributional impacts as well as the straightforward efficiency argument. And I noticed people have been saying the Productivity Commission itself doesn't work on the weekend. So I think a lot more work, a lot more thought needs to go into this before we just go rah, let's cut people's wages on the weekend.
Van, do you think the Prime Minister, the government, is going to pick up on this?
I think that if the government doesn't pick up on the outrage at threats to penalty rates, they're easily going to lose the next election. I don't think they're economically in touch with how the majority of Australian families operate as intersectional economies in themselves. I mean, you said, and Miriam said, as students, you were working on weekends in order to put yourself through university. I did the same thing, and I'm still in the arts community. I work at The Guardian. I also work as, you know, a freelancer and a subcontractor. And I, to get to this position, spent many, many weekends working penalty rates so I could afford to make art and work those sort of crazy hours. And they are relationships that families rely upon with different members, you know, families who can offer some assistance to support the education of their children or can't. And I think taking that away of Saturday and Sunday penalty rates is going to have a huge impact on the economic potential and economic opportunities of families, not to mention, and this is very important, that by the government, you know, singling out retail and hospitality, these are two of the lowest paid industries, the most insecure industries, and wouldn't you know, the industries with higher proportions of women workers. And the big thing with penalty rates too is cutting penalty rates, and the impact on single mothers is absolutely enormous. And the way that those complex family and economic relationships are facilitated, I think if the government pursues it, they will lose the election.
Well, so there you go. And we're all on tremendous Sunday penalty rates here this morning.
The cafe isn't even open.
Thank you for your consideration on these matters, outsiders. Sinclair Davidson, Van Badham, and Miriam Cosick. And that's your lot for RN Sunday Extra today. I'm sorry, no First Dog on the Moon this week. He's in the doghouse again, but we'll let him out next week, sure, I promise. If you've missed a thing, the Sunday Extra podcast is available on our website.
Well, 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 isn't that interesting? Funny how half an hour ago the story was that First Dog on the Moon was going to be here. I guess First Dog on the Moon might possibly perhaps have submitted something which the directors or producers decided was maybe not in the interest of the ABC's relationship with the board to be publishing. And Eric, guess what, mate? You're getting to have a biscuit. And that means that Rowan of Rin has decided that it's biscuit time. So, Bronwyn Bishop's gone. Apparently the CWA, Country Women's Association, famous for their cooking recipes, they had to update their cooking recipe. They've come up with what they call Bronwyn Scones. Bronwyn Scones to celebrate the passing of Bronwyn Bishop, who is now no longer... Hey, come on. You can have it. Bronwyn's no longer Speaker in the House. She's in the doghouse. She's in disfavour. He's definitely got better light-dark perception now that the milky lens seems to be falling back into his eyeball. And the other funny story I heard about Bronwyn Bishop was somebody put a tweet into the ABC, or the ABC picked up the tweet, and what he said was, last time he took a free helicopter ride to a Liberal Party function, it was the Vietnam War. I think that kind of sums up Australia's reaction to the Liberal Party and the National Party, and yeah, to a certain extent, the Labor Party too. Doesn't it, mate? Oh, that's it. All done. Yes, that was a very nice little late morning tea, wasn't it? Yes. You would like more, but I haven't actually got any more on me, so you'll just have to make do with that. Okay? Right. So it hasn't been a real good week for poor old Tony Abbott. He had to get rid of his captain's pick, Bronwyn of the Bishop variety, the impartial Speaker in the House, who managed to evict 393 Labor members of Parliament for saying anything that the Liberal National Party found to be difficult to consider. And as a consequence, Tony Abbott's popularity in the polls is falling down out through the bottom of the floor. And at the same time, he picked the height of the Adam Goods controversy over thousands of people standing up to boo an Aboriginal footballer just because he was an Aboriginal footballer who used to be the Australian of the Year, and they liked him right up until he started talking about his Aboriginal stuff, but they didn't think it was racist to boo him. So that was the atmosphere into which the Prime Minister decided that as regards a referendum on modifying the Constitution of Australia, to acknowledge the fact that before the white people came in their boats 250 years ago, this land was Aboriginal land. All the Aboriginal elders had sort of gathered together so that they could, well, they wanted to gather together so that they could come up with a formal conference to decide what the Aborigines would like to go into the Constitution, and Tony Abbott decided that they couldn't do that because that would be an exclusive process. That would be a them versus us thing. And seeing as, you know, he wants to make it sort of as palatable to his white-bread, racist, suburban, heartland, Liberal National Labor Party core voters, he described the idea as being a bad one because he didn't want a bunch of Aborigines to get together and come up with some perceived log of claims. We're talking about putting something in the Constitution to acknowledge that terra nullius is bullshit, that this is Aboriginal land, that the people who lived here from time immemorial have some rights on the landscape. And Tony Abbott reckoned it might be electorally repugnant if he said, yes, you know, you fellas can tell us what you think should be in the Constitution. No, no, no. Tony Abbott wants to keep it all encompassing. He wants to keep it egalitarian, open to all, by letting the 98.5% of white Australians tell the black fellas what we want to put in the Constitution to say about you fellas apparently haven't been here, even though we couldn't find anybody to sign a treaty with. I don't know what's going to go wrong next with Tony Abbott, but by gee, I hope it's a major event, you know. Something that he just fails to appreciate and then says and does all the wrong things with and makes himself look even more like a piece of shit on a stick than he does at the moment. And as for this idea that the workforce should be divided into two camps, there are those who deserve to be paid double time on Saturday and triple time on Sunday because, let's face it, every other time the Productivity Commission has masturbated with chopsticks and flown a kite balloon labelled, you know, get rid of penalty wages and rates on Sundays, people have come back and said, yes, well, if you do that, we'll have no nurses in the hospitals on the weekends, because the only reason some people are nurses is because they get the penalty rates. They can work 2 or 3 days a week and they can afford to keep their family mortgage afloat. And it's not worth their time to go in there for basic wages. Same was said by the police, same was said by the ambulance, same was said by the fire brigade. So we've got this cadre of workers who matter, and then they're the peasantry who are expected to work for basic wages on the weekend in the coffee shops and at the checkout in the supermarkets, all to make it more convenient for the people who have to pay an electricity bill spread out over a 7-day week. They have to pay rates, or they have to pay rent spread out over a 7-day week. And if they can get their business to be open on a Sunday, that means that they can divide their rates, divide their electricity bill, divide their fixed overhead costs by 7 days per week, and they kid themselves that it makes their business more efficient to do so. And I would say that if their business is clinging on by the skin of its teeth to the point where paying the workers their fair weekend penalty rates is going to make the difference between having it open and not having it open, then forget the accountancy trick to try and make your electricity bill run in the fridge 7 days a week, or the light 7 days a week, or the burger alarm look less on a per day basis, and accept the fact that if your business is not throbbing on a Sunday, don't bloody open it. And so, just as Tony Abbott was running as fast as he could, as hard as he could, away from that particular Productivity Commission recommendation that came out this week, some arsehole on the Sydney waterfront at Botany Bay decided to send 100 wharf workers a tweet or a text at midnight telling them to have a look in their email where they were told that they were being fired because all the work's been put out to contract, and don't bother coming back because their lockers will be cleaned out and sent back to the contents sent back to them via a courier. So somebody set off a dock dispute for Tony Abbott to deal with. That should be fun. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.